In this session, I'd like to introduce to you the evolution and growth of state-level public enterprises in India. The state-level public enterprises in India plays a significant role in the growth and development of Indian economy. They are the mixed bag in terms of structure, objectives, and activities. They are the important instruments of state policy initiatives with the greater relevance into the growth of the economy. Let me first discuss what are public enterprises before we talk about the state-level public enterprises. Public enterprises are the business organizations wholly or partly owned by the state and controlled through the public authority. Some public enterprises are placed under the public ownership because for social causes, and it is through this service that products should be delivered in the state monopoly. The public enterprises in India operate at three levels, basically at the state, at central, and at municipal administration. At the center, they are called as central public sector enterprises, and at the state, they are called as state-level public enterprises. And at the municipal level, they are called the municipal administrative units. The SLPEs are important instruments set up for the development of infrastructure in the respective states for the supply of goods and services, utilities, and other important requirements that the state requires. At the center, they are called as central public enterprises, and basically these enterprises cover vast array of activities such as high technology, manufacturing, production, defense, aerospace, marketing, financial services, insurance, and retail sectors. These enterprises are called as state-level public enterprises at the state, and these enterprises are important instruments set up for the development of infrastructure in the states for the supply of goods and services and other utility requirements of the state. There are both economic and social objectives behind the establishment of these SLPEs. These enterprises will have their own public systems and ownership at the central level. These enterprises operate at three different levels, such as the central enterprises, the state enterprises, and the municipal corporations. Let us talk about the central public enterprises first before we understand what are state enterprises. At the center, these enterprises are called as central public enterprises, and basically they cover a vast array of activities such as high technology, manufacturing, production, defense, aerospace, marketing, financial services, insurance, retail industries, etc. These enterprises at the state level are called as state-level public enterprises. SLPEs are very important institutions at the state level which are engaged in the supply of the regular goods and services and other utility services for the states. There are both social and economic objective behind the establishment of these enterprises in all the states. These SLPEs attain their objectives by generating their own profits and also work towards their own sustainable growth. There has been a significant expansion of these SLPE system in various states during the post-independence era. However, sizable expansion has come only during post-1991. And no systematic efforts have been made by the states to assess the role and the structure and the functioning of these enterprises by the respective states. Now let us talk about why these SLPEs started gaining very huge demand by the respective states. These enterprises constitute a very important segment in the Indian public sector system, and these enterprises were set up within the ambit of the state of the union, and the industrial policy resolution of 1956 contributes to form the basis for establishing these enterprises by the government of India. These enterprises envisages them to play the role of nation building and the establishment of the egalitarian society. This ideological comments can be rationalized more through these enterprises at the regional level by forming at the different states. These enterprises were established to have a balanced regional development and has been the core contribution for the states to the growth and development of industrial policy. The relationship between the SLPEs and the relationship between the CPSEs are being located as one. It is nothing but the regional development growth. Is that these ideological commitments can be realized more through the role of SLPEs. Balanced regional development has been the core consideration among these SLPEs, which have been stated in the Industrial Policy Resolution. The relation between the SLPE and the regional development is that the former is an important agency of the planned development and the latter is an important aspect of such a development. Identifying the backward region means, in fact, identifying the location for the public investment. In such regions, it becomes inevitable for the governments to step in the solely and majorly participation by the governments in conjunction with the private enterprises. The state as a region of development assessment becomes relevant because of two main reasons. Firstly, the statistical evidence to the extent available is more reliable and available in terms of the state, and secondly, the state happens to be an important administrative controller for these enterprises at various levels. These SLPs exceeds 4 times the number of the central enterprises in its members and also reaching out people. Their rate of growth in terms of the number has slowed down very recently, it has been noted, but still in numbers they have been more than that of the central enterprises at the center. Wide range of statistics have been formed to prove that the functioning of SLPEs has been very significant in terms of the contributions to the growth of the nation. Wide region within the state whose level of economic prosperity is particularly wherein the same states have some significance in the problem and development of the state vis-a-vis the country. Let's now talk about the SLPEs and what are the main objectives of establishing these SLPEs at the state level. These SLPEs are set up specially to meet the gaps in the socio-economic development such as industrial growth, employment creation, health, education, and provision of amenities by the respective states. Services like electricity, medical care, transportation, irrigation, tourism, warehousing, and water facilities reaching people was the main target of setting these SLPs. The policy of mixed economy led to the creation of these enterprises large in number by the respective states. A number of enterprises were brought into place by the Companies Act of 1956, wherein more members have joined only later in 1991. These SLPEs are numerous and are engaged in the activities which have been closer and impactful to the livelihood of people. The main motto of establishing the central enterprises has been quite different from that of the respective state enterprises. Central enterprises have been talking about the growth patterns of the country as a whole, whereas the state enterprises started restricting themselves to the performance of the respective states. These enterprises also have grown accordingly with respect to the state 5-year plans which have been constituted and then implemented by the Planning Commission of India. The growth of SLPEs is attributed to the historical fact that they have been ideologically been initiated during the first Companies Act in 1956. The SLPEs in India owe their origin to the feature that the inheritance from the princely state and then practicing of utilizing the local resources to meet the local needs and to fulfill the responsibility of the state towards the citizenship is the prime motto to start these SLPEs. Lot of research has been done in this to study the role, the significance, the growth patterns of these enterprises in the country. Mishra R.K., one of the research eminent professors who have been researching on the state level enterprises in the country, also averred that some enterprises have started with a view to have the utility based activities as their major focus, and then they started functioning in the respective states. A considerable chunk of these SLPEs have seen the light of the day on account of the decision of the various state governments to assume to the entrepreneurial responsibilities in controlling inflation, equitable distribution of scarce commodities, mopping up of monopoly profits, and to create job opportunities to the people of the state. Some of the important reasons for the establishment of these enterprises include to meet the development of the basic infrastructure such as construction of roads, bridges, the provisions for the electricity supply, the industry and other irrigation facilities for agriculture, to exploit the local resources and also to develop the entrepreneurial skills in the respective states, to promote balanced regional growth among the states in the country, and also to uplift the weaker sections of the state and also bring them to the mainstreams of the society, and also to set up core manufacturing enterprises in terms by promoting the regional industrial growth. The other objectives that are also included in the establishment of these enterprises include to facilitate basic needs by promoting health, housing, and primary education to the people of the state. Agriculture being one of the priority sectors in the states has been promoted by establishing the agricultural based organizations by the respective states. Now let us talk about how these SLPs have grown over a period of time. As we have already been talking about the key challenges that the SLPs in terms of the main objectives have discussed, the development of these enterprises has been adapted as a policy of the state governments in the country. Though no state officially stated the aims and objectives of these enterprises, it can be inferred that one of the important objectives is to attract funds from the financial institutions such as banks and other private institutions to enable the states to understand the activities on a long scale basis. Although aim is to cut the red tape associated with the government administration and help the expedite the service and works of these respective enterprises. Another reason may be to keep the growth of these corporations in line with the growth of the central enterprises, which have been growing very, very fast. The SLPs has been organized under the variety of local and legal structures by the respective states. The organizations and the forms of these SLPs are broadly falling under 4 or 5 major groups. These 5 major groups include departmental enterprises, government companies, public corporations, companies registered under the societies of companies, and also in terms of joint ventures. About 75% of these enterprises have been organized as government companies, and around 10% has been organized and incorporated as public corporations and cooperatives at the state level. A number of enterprises were incorporated under the different 5-year plans. From this chart, we can see that during the first and the second 5-year plan, on an average, 6 enterprises were established per year. With more than 28 coming in place in the first plan, the number of SLPEs shot up to 175 during 96 and 97. The number of these enterprises grew tremendously to 594 in the 5th plan. During the 7th plan, the number has further gone up to 802. Currently, there are around 1100 SLPEs which are functioning in different states in the country. The highest number of enterprises was set up during the 4th and the 5th plan period in the country. Nearly 20% of these enterprises were set up in the 5th plan, wherein Kerala being the number 1 state with 23 enterprises at that time, and now numbering to 101 enterprises. During 61 and during 1980, between these two periods, the state enterprises got expanded substantially as states have grown, and then states have become quite independent. States such as Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Kerala, Maharashtra, Orissa, Punjab, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan are the few states which started establishing their own SLPEs for economic growth. On the other hand, states like Assam, Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur, Tripura and Arunachal Pradesh were not growing large in numbers because of restrictive transportation and other political problems. Now let us talk about the classification of these enterprises by the respective states. The report of the 7th Finance Commission made lot of estimates in terms of the investment patterns by the respective state level enterprises, and then they decided that they could be divided into financial, promotional, manufacturing, trade and service, utility and the welfare enterprises. These enterprises were also accepted and then focused by the 8th and 9th Finance Commissions during 1984. The first includes the state financial corporations, which was set up by all the state governments by the year 1951, where the Financial Corporation Act was created. The category of promotional enterprises, which were majorly engaged in promotional activities such as tourism, the trade and services such as civil supplies, state trading corporations, etc., was set up during that period. Commercial enterprises included these trade and service enterprises. During 1986, the SLPEs were reclassified in terms of the manufacturing enterprises because majority of the states started establishing the manufacturing enterprises. The trade and service, promotion, finance, And what are these five major classifications that are going to help us to understand the functioning of these enterprises? Let us understand the main aim of establishing these enterprises under these 5-6 categories. The manufacturing enterprises dominated the scenario of various states. These states include Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Gujarat, Karnataka, Kerala, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu. The financial enterprises received an encouragement role and provided to the financial trust and created a suitable infrastructure pertaining to financing the various small industries in the states was established through these financial enterprises. Andhra Pradesh being leading champion in establishing and in the functioning and performance of the enterprises, AP is also included in the list of financial enterprises promotion along with Assam, Gujarat, Karnataka, Kerala, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal. The promotional enterprises was set up to orient social activities with an economic target at the different state levels. These states include Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Kerala and Karnataka. The utility sector enterprises comprised of the state road transport corporation and unbinded the power sector utilities of the state. And these include the states of Karnataka, Orissa, Tamil Nadu and West Bengal, which were trying to establish the electricity departments at different levels. The most important and very important area which is not to be neglected in the state is the regional economic development, and this has been attained by the welfare corporations which was set up with the explicit objective of bringing the people with the mainstream activities. And states like Kerala and Uttar Pradesh started functioning and establishing the welfare enterprises at this level. The number of enterprises under each category have been shown in the figure which has been shown there. Nearly 35% of these enterprises are formed under the promotional enterprises, wherein 29% among the utility sector and 23% in manufacturing and other welfare sectors have been included. A small number of these enterprises have gone to the financial sector. Now let us talk about the manufacturing sector at a large. With the direct involvement of the various state governments, these manufacturing enterprises were established by every state, and these segment of the enterprises have made a suitable contribution to the economy. The main objective of setting up these enterprises are filling the entrepreneurial gaps caused by the private sector in the various states. This has been the primary objective as private sector was mushrooming in all the states. Undertaking the capital intensive and risk prone industrial activities, because the states being were majorly focusing upon the manufacturing hubs to become, their priority is to see that the risk is being covered by these enterprises. Supplementing and supporting the efforts of private sector in the industrial development of the state and creating completion with the private sector the various areas of industrial activities. Exploiting the new technology know-how and also taking the technology advantage in favor of the state in the areas of high technology base. These manufacturing enterprises were also targeting the monopoly enterprises which have been initiated in the respective states. Generating of surplus and also increasing the GDPs of the respective state is also one of the important function of these manufacturing enterprises. As told earlier, the states which are pioneering in the numbers and performance of these manufacturing enterprises include Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, which have got the maximum number of enterprises in the respective states. Just to name few of these enterprises which have been focusing upon the manufacturing enterprises by these respective states include the industrial development corporations, the mineral development corporations, mining development corporations of the respective states. Let us talk about the trade and service sector. The state governments were required to help the small producers in the markets where the products and thereby provide the flip to growth the small and medium enterprises in the respective states. To even out the variations in the supply of demand of these essential commodities and the agricultural produce, the state started establishing these trade and service sector enterprises. The programs that the various states are engaged in carrying out the required large construction efforts which were met by the trade and service sector enterprises are being coming under this particular sector. The main objectives of these sector include marketing of goods and services by the small producers, because the state takes the ownership of these enterprises and see that the small and the medium producers are brought together to facilitate a market ground to the distribution of their market produce. Removing the poverty and unemployment and strengthening the economic base of the producers by providing financial assistance. Achieving economy in execution of the construction works is also one of the important aim of this trade and service sector. Some of these enterprises which fall under the respective states include the state's trading corporations, the warehousing, civil supplies, etc. Next, let us talk about the financial sector. These financial sector enterprises include the state financial corporations, industrial development corporations, state investment enterprises, state leasing corporations, and some state-run chit funds and banking institutions at their own level. The main objectives of these enterprises include the accelerating the growth of industrialization in the respective state is a key challenge which these enterprises face. Removing the regional imbalances in the industrial development of the state and also to promote the growth of the tiny and small and medium enterprises in the state and to generate employment opportunities for the people of the state. For example, the state's financial corporations, investment development corporations, cooperative societies, small state-run banks are a part of the financial corporation enterprises in the respective states. Now let us talk about the promotional enterprises which are also very important in the growth of the state. The promotional enterprises form an important segment in the functioning of the state level public enterprises in India. The term promotional enterprises include the forest. The promotional enterprises form an important segment in the functioning of these state level public enterprises. The term promotional includes forest, tourism, fisheries, etc. The main objective of setting up these enterprises include to promote the economic activities assigned to them and to encourage the private entrepreneurs by direct investments, acting as a model agencies in their area of operation and self-sustained growth, And these enterprises basically include dairy development corporations, tourism development corporations, and other enterprises. Now, let us talk about the very important segment of the welfare enterprises in the state. The welfare enterprises are the new breed of enterprises in the classification of the state level public enterprises in the country. The broad objectives of these welfare enterprises include to help and uplift the weaker sections of the society across the states and to transform the economic structure of these weaker sections, financially support the weaker sections by providing various financial services through loans and other disbursements, to work for the upliftment of these people by the social cause and to bring them to the main streamline of activities, to mobilize the institutional credit for socio-economic restrictions of the weaker sections. These enterprises basically include the welfare corporations, the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe development corporations, backward development corporations, and backward development financial corporations. When we talk about the present context of these functioning of the state level public enterprises, there has been around 1100 enterprises which are working in all the states. As per the CAG, the functioning and performance of these enterprises is been very significant in the growth and development of the country. Kerala occupies the first place in terms of the number of working SLPEs in the country, which have been numbered as 1100, whereas West Bengal and Karnataka occupies the second place and the third place respectively. About 34% of these state level public enterprises are formed under the promotional enterprises which have been dealt earlier, with a 29% and 23% by the manufacturing and utility sector enterprises which have been following the promotional enterprises. Around 47% of the profits of these enterprises and then 42% of these enterprises have been incurring losses. Uttar Pradesh, the total investment in these enterprises stood at 3 lakhs crores with a major contribution of 60% coming from the long-term loan and 39% coming from the paid-up capital. The major portion of the total investment is shared by the states of Karnataka, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra. The number of employees among these SLPEs is very huge, as there are about 19 lakh employees who have been associated in working with these enterprises. Andhra Pradesh stood first in terms of having highest manpower in the state level public enterprises in the country and was also ranked first in terms of the turnover of these enterprises and third in terms of the investment among these enterprises. The enterprises in Gujarat, Karnataka and Orissa are among the top profit-making enterprises in the states. The state of Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu have the highest number of enterprises which make profit and ranked first, second and third respectively. Kerala, West Bengal and Assam were having the highest number of loss-making enterprises in the states. Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu have adapted various innovative and new policy initiatives to improve the functioning of these state enterprises and also taken lot of initiatives by the respective governments. Karnataka is assisting the enterprises in upgrading the technologies and also to restructure their performance in terms by supporting them through various policy initiatives. Therefore, it is suggestible that the successful models which have been obtained among these enterprises could be replicated by the states wherein the loss-making enterprises are very huge in numbers. By adapting the progressive policies, the states of Karnataka are trying to build a strong and a vibrant industrial base by strengthening their own state level enterprises. The policies that the state adapted for strengthening these enterprises include assisting the enterprises to upgrade their technologies, assisting in facing and improving the increased competition, and a radical restructuring program to train the manpower and also to conduct the MOU exercise at the various enterprises. Let us try to conclude what these SLPs are talking about, the growth and then the evolution that we have studied so far. SLPs began the second most important component of PE system in our country, contributes around 11% of the GDP. Identifying the basic cause, and despite of repeated losses, these enterprises stood to achieve the economic growth and development of the country. There has been a significant improvement in terms of the performance and healthy competition with the introduction of new management strategies, techniques and technology initiatives by the respective states to see that these enterprises are been performing better in the respective states. In the current scenario, the SLPs have initiated reforms and restructuring phases of programs to meet the challenges and to become more financial viable among the economic development of the state. With this, let us conclude this session by few important findings that have been understood from the growth and evolution of these enterprises, that is the state level public enterprises in India. Thank you.